So again, if you don't know my name is Samantha Bowers. I'm the consultant for continuing education at the State Library of Iowa. And I am joined today by another one of my state library colleagues, Tom Kaiser, who sometimes works our reference desk in the beautiful law library and sometimes gets to do fun stuff like this, which is talk about what I have called strategic treasure hunting. And my thought behind that title was oftentimes in towns big and small, we are sitting on just gold mines of local history. And so Tom is going to be here today to share a little bit about how you can kind of mine what you have at your disposal as far as local history materials go, and how you can make that more accessible through digital formats to your community. So Tom, if there's anything else you want to say by introduction of who you are or what we're talking about today, I will turn it over to you.
No, you pretty much covered it. I'll give pardon me, the quick background that in addition to being a librarian, I am an archivist, so I have come at it from that side of things to learn more about it on related to part of my job. So hopefully I can pass something along that'll be useful to you. And like Sam said, we're going to cover information relating to identifying and selecting materials from your local history collections or your special collections to digitize so that you can make them more readily available to the public. We'll go ahead and, everybody knows that they have a local history section in their libraries, whether it's a shelf of material or if it's some places are fortunate enough to have an entire room devoted to their local history. The one thing I just want to make sure everybody is comfortable with is that only you, being the local public librarian, and the people that you work with will know what is the most important parts of your local history collections to your patrons. Either it's important because it's a resource that lots of people rely on, go back to, use over and over, or it's a resource that is scarce out there in the world and your library is the only place you can go to find that information, or it's a resource that is so predominantly local that nobody even knows it exists, but some of the people in the area. So we'll start with the basics. To begin identifying what in your collection you can use to digitize and make available to the public, you have to know what's in your local history collection. What you need to do is not just rely upon, oh, I know that there is this file that covers an important event in the area, or we have the family history of this one family. Like so many things in library world, you have more resources and more information than you can readily touch each one and know what's there. So the most important part to get started is to identify what you have in your collection. And the gold ring that's aspired to is to have a full and complete inventory of your collection, your local history materials, and to create a finding aid for it. Some libraries have a lot of their materials cataloged and in their catalog. Some libraries have a few finding aids that somebody wrote up, oh, here's all the genealogy resources. And it's, the first page of a binder. But the librarian or a staff member or even a volunteer, if they can go through and identify in brief terms what they have in their collection, they'll be able to make more informed decisions on what's the best way to proceed with selecting and digitizing materials. So that's one of the easy places to start. And it's one of the things where you can approach it in several different ways. One, like I said, there's a lot of libraries have all or portions of their local history collection in their catalog. If you have already bound print material, like a 100-year anniversary history of your community, or you have the the book on some local event that was very important. Those may already be in your catalog. So it's usually going to be collections of materials that have been gathered or created by local people, small press items that were done locally. I'm sure most libraries in their special collections or their local history collections have a cookbook that was done by the 1957 JCs, or a cookbook that was done by the local Boy Scouts mothers. There are all sorts of materials like that. You may also have a small print item that's local, something like, the local history of the floods of 1927 or whatever it might be. Those are the sort of materials that you need just to be aware of what's in there so you can make informed decisions on how to proceed for digitization. The other thing to identify is materials that you might want to do because they are older, potential for damage, already damaged, materials that might not be replaceable. So in identifying it, you need to annotate that when you identify it, so you can make a better selection, and also, identify things that are different types of materials: photographs, diaries, letters, maps. The other thing to consider in all local history collections, there's going to be items. You might have a trophy or a plaque or a commemorative item, a plate or whatever it might be. Those are not precluded from being digitized to be put into a collection so it can be shared with your patrons. So the quick 1, 2, 3 is to inventory at whatever level you're comfortable, as time permits, as staffing permits, to identify the materials that you have in your local history collection, and to identify content, and to identify type, and to identify condition. Those are all going to play into the ways that you're going to be needing to make your selections when it comes time to decide what you're going to actually digitize. So is there any question on the basics of the stuff related to that before I move on?
I haven't seen questions come through on that while they're rolling. Can you talk a little bit about how you, like, what if someone feels like, well, I don't really have enough here?
Sure.
Like, is there kind of a minimum threshold that you would say, if you've identified X amount, then it's worthwhile to proceed?
That's entirely based on what you perceive as the local needs. It could be as simple as the most important local person from the 1920s who had a big splash in the history of either your area or in the state or more. You could digitize and just have a single photograph as a collection out there. One of the examples I can give with one of the libraries that I'm working with right now is that they're doing genealogy information. So while some of the materials are numerous in pages, it's still just the genealogy of one local family. So it's as small as, focused as that. I don't necessarily say small, but as focused as that. Or it can be as immense as you want. You can have a collection of a huge number of images. We have one library out there that's digitizing the negatives of a local photographer who had, combined with his previous employer's materials, over 200 boxes of negatives of photographic images. So well into the tens of thousands of images. And that's one where they've decided we're just going to start doing it and see how far we get. So they already have several thousand images out there. So it can be as small as just a single item, a single document, a single image to be a collection, or you can have a collection comprised of hundreds of images.
We have one question that came through to hosts and panelists, which I think you may address later. What
Yep.
about concerns about copyright? One example would be yearbooks. We've seen public libraries that have digitized, but we are concerned about copyright.
Right. The thing to do is to check with the publisher of the book. A lot of times it's done locally. A lot of times the schools arrange to keep all the copyright. I know that there are situations out there where libraries inherit a whole collection of yearbooks because the local high school has consolidated, and so the school in that town is no longer there, and all the materials are now at the library. For the most part, it's one where most of the copyright for the yearbooks belongs, at least in part, to the school. It's usually not entirely just to the publisher. It is best to double check on that. I didn't remember to look up the exact date. Public domain has moved forward from 1923. I think we're up to 1926 or so of anything that was published there or before. That material you can put on no matter whose it was, as long as you're using that particular version. You know, there may be a 1920 copy of a book that somebody reprinted in 1980. And well, you can actually put the 1920 version out there on the internet any way you want. So with yearbooks, depending on what years they cover, obviously there's a portion that could be absolutely no concern at all. But then it is always best to check to see who has the right to say yes or no. A lot of times you're going to end up with a situation of what they call an orphaned work. And that's going to be one where either the holder of the copyright, if it was a company, a business, a publisher, has folded decades ago and has disappeared from all known locations, or it's something written by somebody years ago and there's no way to track them down any longer. It's one of the ones that you do have to do your due diligence, and then there is resources out there that you can go to and look at to give you some guidance on that. If it is an orphan work and you don't know who owns the copyright, or if you're unable to locate them, the unable to locate happens a lot in local history collections in small towns. You may know that that was written by, Tom Kaiser in 1952, and you know that he had two sons, and you go to find them, and you find that one is passed with no children, the other one moved out of state. You can't locate them anywhere. That gets to be what's known as an orphan work, and there's different strategies that you can do for putting that out there. There is the gray area strategy. You can digitize things, put them out there, and in the metadata you can put the disclaimer that you're unsure where the copyright holder is, or that they're not there, and that if there's any questions, to contact you. And that leaves it open so that if someone steps forward and says, that's my grandfather's, I'm the heir, I have copyright, I don't want that up there, then you sit there and say, are you sure? People, you can try to talk with them, work with them, and if it's insistent, you can take it down. Usually, and this is a usually, direct from a person to a library for materials that would be digitized and online. If it comes from a descendant or a person, their first step is usually to ask you to take it down. Mm-hmm. It's not until you get into something where you're fighting against something like Amazon or something that it's the, here's the lawyer jumping on you. If it's the biggest problem is that, you don't want to use more super recent materials. Obviously, like I said, if you have a cookbook from the local JCs from the 50s, you can go to them and say, we'd like to digitize this and put it online. And 99 times out of 100, they're going to say, that's great, awesome, because any chance of them using that for a fundraiser back in the day is long since passed. And they know that very few of those exist, and that they would love just to have their name out there, their recognition, their community involvement.
That's great. We did have two more questions come through
Sure.
that I know you're going to address later. So I have a running list. And we've talked identify. So once we've figured out what we have, what comes next?
Then we move on to selecting what we from what we have to help you decide what to actually digitize so you can place it online. Briefly, the three rough questions you have to ask yourself is, should it be digitized? Can it be digitized? And may it be digitized? And it's easy to know on the may it be digitized. We just talked about that. It's a copyright concern. If you look at how you got it, where you got it, the issue that most libraries are going to run into on the copyright of local materials that aren't published, letters, diaries, genealogies, etc., is that it was there before you were, probably. It came to the library and you don't know who deposited it or when. The gold standard is that anything that gets given to the library of that type of material, local history, is that you get a deed of gift from the person who donates it to you. And I'll be able to provide examples for that in some materials we'll put into the system that you can look at later. If you're not already familiar with a deed of gift, it's simply just a document that says, I'm giving this to the library. I had the right to give it to the library. I'm giving the library all the rights to do whatever they want with it. And it can be as brief as that, or it can be very long, very convoluted. In the archival world, they'll have things where somebody will say, okay, here's all my personal letters, and you can do anything you want with them for research, but you can't publish them until I'm dead, or you can't publish them until 10 years after I'm dead. And, at the very top of the heap, the thing you see with that is things like presidential letters. The LBJ materials were given to the University of Texas, held until X number of years after he passed. So, I think it was 50 years or 25 years, something like that. And so it's there, it can be looked at, you wait, then they can do what they want with it and publish it. The same thing in a deed of gift for anything that's given to a library. And then that's a document that you keep forever. So that's the gold standard, is to get that done. But as I said, you're going to have all that material that you've got in your special collections, in your local history collection, that you have no idea who gave it to you. You don't know when it came into the library. It's been there since the day you started. That falls into that area where if you have any concerns, you can sit there and see if you can check with somebody that you would presume would know. This once again comes to your local resources. Obviously, if it was a fundraising cookbook from the JCs, you can go to them. Sometimes those institutions fold from your town, and you can check with your local townspeople to find out, well, does that mean that everybody's now doing that in the next town over, or is it just gone? Some organizations have regional and national levels that you can go to. But if it's just, say, a diary of a woman from the 19-teens, you can see if she has descendants in the area, if there's any question. Well, actually, I apologize. 19-teens would be before the date cutoff for public domain, so it could be used no matter what. But if it was something, say, from the 1940s, you could check for family members, you could check for descendants. And then once again, you can always decide if the gray area is gray enough for you to go ahead and put it out and worry about it later down the road. So the may it portion That's the copyright issue. That's the who's involved with it issue. Should it be digitized is probably the toughest decision that you'll have to face. That's when you look at your materials and you have to weigh it in your mind on, is this important enough to invest in time and effort to put it online? Is there going to be enough audience to use it? Or is it of enough base significant value that it doesn't necessarily currently have enough audience, but it's something that's because it's a previously undisclosed resource, something that, sure, the 100-year anniversary history written by the local people at the time didn't get a lot of use off the shelf, but that's a base sort of information that you may want to include for your patrons to find online, and then they'll be able to bring it up and look at it. And tied with the audience portion of should it be digitized is where you get to make the next step to the bigger world. If you digitize materials and you put it out on an open platform, it's going to be such that when the person whose triple great grandfather was born, grew up in your community, and all of his children dispersed around the US, and now you've got his descendant looking up materials about, hey, I heard that my triple great grandfather lived in Des Moines. So you look it up, and of course, the smaller the community, the fewer the resources. So if you have information that gives the base, broad information of your area, your community, the people, the events, that just automatically leaves it open for the community of users to be even greater than just the people that live in the city limits. So that's part of what you have to think about based on audience and the value of the material to be out there. A portion of the should it be digitized question that relates back to some earlier stuff is that the size of the collection at this point, when you're determining it, only really weighs into, the only limiting factor on size is your time, staffing, and desire to get it done. If you have, say, 3 shelves of genealogy materials that it covers 20 local family names, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you deciding that's what you want to do. The thing on deciding how to do it and should it be digitized is what level of steps do you want to do that in? Are you going to commit the time to have a staff person start at A and go all the way to Z and do everything in between? Put it up in the 27 different family names, each has their own little collection under the umbrella of my local town genealogy? Or are you going to sit there and say, okay, here's the family names that are still in the area, we're going to do those first. Then here's the family names that are important to the area, we'll do those next. And then here's everybody else and here's the caveat, that I am unaware of the importance to the area, but they are part of our history. So, you have to make your own game plan on the should it be digitized. You have to decide, what's most important to your community, to your patrons, to the community as an entity, not necessarily community as a people. So, a basic history book of the founding and the development of the area. The other ones that can sometimes shoot right to the top that make it easy on a collection decision is, oh, well, here's the collection of newspaper clippings that we have of Mr. A.B. Smith from the 1880s and 90s, who was the most important person here. And he went and was a local representative at the State House for a decade, and he did all these laws. Well, sure, that's an easy decision. If somebody had that much influence to the development of your community, they can go higher up on your rating of, should I digitize this, and should I do it first, second, third, fourth? There's nothing wrong when you're looking at digitizing and deciding what you should do first to find something that is not necessarily the most important, not necessarily the biggest, but something that is engaging and an easy step for you to get into the whole digitization world. So if you have something, and just as simple as the community, the 5 pictures of the parade and the materials set up at the gazebo in the town square. So you have maybe 2 documents and a dozen photographs of the 1976 bicentennial celebration in the town. That's something that you could put out there that would, be a nice baby step, something that is engaging, something that has images and materials. It's all, at your comfort zone, in addition to the reality of what you can do and how you can get it done and what's necessary. When you're looking at that, one aspect of it falls under that question of, can they be digitized? The can they be digitized usually refers only to the physicality of the item. Obviously, things that are very, very brittle are something that you have to decide, can that be handled enough to be digitized for paper? If you have a box of letters of family members over several generations, and because that came to you meaning the public library, decades ago, it's been rummaged through 100 times, the can it be digitized sort of falls under, what sort of work do we need to do ahead of time to prep it for being digitized? Do we need to go through and put letters back together because there's 4 pages and one is misfiled in there somewhere? Do we need to make an order of by who wrote it, by the dates it was written? So that's part of the, can they be digitized? Is this a collection that's organization and arrangement is useful enough to do, or do I need to do a lot of work beforehand? The other part on the, can they be digitized, is going to fall to part of your training and comfort zone. Do you need a little help first to get some of the skills necessary to make a good run at digitizing a collection, which ties closely with having the technical infrastructure? Do you have the equipment? Do you have the anything you would need to help you digitize something? Obviously, there are some items to be digitized have some very special needs. There's besides just a basic scanner, there's a whole separate scanner and equipment used to digitize slides and negatives. You need to have different kind of scanner to be able to handle extremely oversized items, newspaper page size, posters, maps. And then there's also, like I said earlier, if you're going to digitize anything that is an item, which it doesn't preclude it from being in a digital collection, it just has some of its own special needs to do things like trophies, plaques, artifacts, the basketball from 1952 when your high school team won state in its division that's signed by everybody. All of those things can be done. There's just a few other concerns to take into the mix when you're trying to decide, can it be digitized? So some of those questions that fold into all 3 is, are the most popular materials something that needs to be out there first? Are they, able to be digitized because they're not falling apart? Are they unique materials? That's your area only place to find them. And then, the difficulty falls under the can they be digitized? If it's something where you have only a limited staff and a limited time, and you have a mountain of material, do you do it according to the old statement of how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time? Do you just start and go, or do you cherry pick certain parts of it so that you can get the material that's going to be most relevant, and then maybe at a later date be able to get the entirety of it? So then once you've gone and you've looked at your materials and you've identified them, and then you've gone through and made a selection process, and you have a handful, 2, 3 collections that you've decided is your starting point, then you can, the nice thing about digitization is that if you have all the material over here that is for collection A, and then collection B and collection C, and it comes time to digitize it, you don't have to start at the beginning of A and go to the end, and then B and go to the end. You can see if your workflow, one of your decisions is, oh, I'm going to do everything that's a photograph first, regardless of what collection it's in, just because I can do the setup on my scanner and I can just whip that out real quick. Then move on to print materials, or move on to you may have a diary that's a book that you need to keep lifting and turning pages. So you can use your decisions to involve some workflow. In the selection process, there's a few things to consider when you're doing that. If you have a lot of unbound papers, right before you're going to do the digitization process, you're going to need to probably make an arrangement of doing some physical processing, keeping things bundled together, but removing paper clips or removing staples, or if older ones may have those old brass brads that they stuck through and then folded them over. So you just need to make sure that when you make your selection, then you also include, oh, I'm going to have to do this sort of prep work with each collection to do it. Obviously, you may have a lot of materials in binders, 3-ring binder. And the only process there is you're going to have to know how to handle that large stack of papers, keep them organized how you need to keep them organized outside of the binder, of course. So that's all part of getting everything ready to go, thinking through your workflow after you've looked at your collections that you've selected, and then you can move forward from there. Any questions?
We've had a few, we have had a couple things roll in. One, and I'm not sure if you'll address this later, but we've talked a lot about copyright and dates and years and etc. Are you aware of any sort of ready reference type document from Copyright Office or anyone else about copyright in the US? I started a quick search and then got a little bit distracted taking attendance, but maybe that's something we can include in a resource guide if you know of something.
Well, that lines out some of the copyright questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's several resources for that.
Great.
There's there's one that is put out that's copyright and unpublished materials, and they have a large FAQ section in it.
Good.
And it's that's at archivist.org.
Okay.
From the Society of American Archivists. And so and they're nice enough to actually have it licensed under Creative Commons, so you can use it for whatever you want.
There we go.
It has that question that I brought up, is what if nobody can determine who owns the copyright?
Yeah.
And it covers all of the stuff that's related to using unpublished works without permission from the copyright holder, which, as we know, as librarians, falls under the Fair Use Doctrine, Section 107. But that more or less precludes it from being digitized, because then it's no longer for an individual's use. It's for everybody's use, which is when they think they say is a no-no.
Okay.
But then you can have some tips on how to decide if it's published or unpublished and where to find that information. Obviously, a lot of it's pretty common sense. If it's somebody's handwritten journal and there's only one, well, more than likely that's an unpublished work. That's never been published out there. It's not like the Diary of Anne Frank or something like that that's been put out there. That being said, if you have the diary and you have the right to use it, and it's pre 1926, like I said, I believe that's the cutoff for when things are in the public domain. It doesn't matter if somebody published that in the 1970s, because they're considered different entities.
Sure.
The original work and a derivative work. So therefore, you can scan and put out the original, but you could not do the derivative one without permission. Sure. So yeah.
There's a couple other questions that I'm kind of saving till a little later, but there is one that just rolled in on selection that I want to hear your opinion on. And this came to hosts and panelists. Is it best practice to digitize items that are not going to be given to the permanent collection? So if someone gave you something to digitize, but they want to keep the original, is that something you can take into mind when you're considering selecting materials for digitization?
Yes. Once again, if you're working with an individual and they say, I've got all these pictures that were taken of my one relative who was in World War II, and it's got pictures of him all over the South Pacific because he was a Marine. I want to share them with the library. I want to share them. You talk with them. You want to digitize them. I don't care. I want them out there. You still should get a deed of gift stating that you have the right to use the digital image. And even if they want to keep the originals, that way there's no misunderstanding 20 years from now after that person has passed away, and then their grandson has decided, I don't want grandfather's picture, or triple, quadruple great grandfather. You can sit there and say, no, I was given permission. Here's the thing.
You would also at that point want to determine if it holds value to you as a cultural institution too. Correct. I mean, you don't just want to digitize someone's Christmas pictures just for the sake of digitizing Christmas pictures, but if it meets your sort of identifying criteria to say this is valuable to our town or our local history, and then it meets your selection criteria as well. So you're correct. It's still space, it's still work. And even though it seems like, we'll digitize that, you still want to run it through those other filters. Would that be right?
Yep, absolutely. And, and sometimes those are pre-established, who, what, where, when, and why for your community. You may be presented with information of something you had no idea that. So if you're deciding to start to put out, important people of your community, and you find out that there's this one person, in this case, let's say, he won, Congressional Medal of Honor, but you had no idea that person was a member of your community in the day, you may have to expand it. You may have to think really hard on it. One of the ones that is sort of outside of this topic is developing your own local history collection criteria. The vast majority of our local history collections in the public libraries are not actively seeking to expand their materials. This is the thing that's it's what has come to the library, been given or brought to the library. So if working with your staff, your people, your board, your local genealogy folks, you decide to move forward and develop a collection policy, you may
Yes.
have to look at that and relate to what would happen for digitization. Would you want to do something specifically for that in that relationship? One of the examples that has been done over the past, couple of years around the US is a community will sit there and say, okay, we want every community member to bring in a picture of anybody in the town in their Boy Scout or Girl Scout uniforms. We want to show all the people that did, or whatever the topic may be. We want any 4th of July parade pictures anybody has, bring 2, and we'll digitize them. We'll put them online with all the information you give us, and we'll be able to have a little collection showing, look how patriotic our community is. And it could be anything. There's been communities I've heard that have gone back and said, we want all of the high school football team pictures that you got that shows, other than just the whole team standing there. We want, shots of them on the field, shots of them,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the time. We only have about 15 minutes left
Yep.
in our scheduled time. So I want to
Right.
make sure we get to some of the other highlights you have covered here. So
Yep.
We've identified, selected. Can you breeze us through the next couple?
Let me see here. That's righty. So I think that's, evaluating, prioritizing, selecting. The scanning process itself is usually very straightforward. You'll have to have an idea of what equipment you're going to work with and become familiar with it. And then you're going to have to develop your workflow on, actually physically scanning the item. It sounds a little self-evident, but the things that you need to get used to is different scanners will have different default orientations on them, so your images aren't coming up sideways. You'll have to decide, depending on the scanner, if you're going to use any of its automatically correcting things. Some have settings to automatically de-skew, which means if the image is slightly this way, when you scan it, then it will adjust and hold it the right way. And then plus, most scanners have a whole range of material data software to manipulate images. So you have to decide, am I just going to show it the way it is, or am I going to spend the time to digitally enhance it? So that's a very easy thing to get your point up to. When it comes to making the materials available to your public, there's a whole wide range of options out there. The very basic level is you make an image and you can put it on your web page somewhere. Of course, the issue there is quantity. Doing your own situation where you put hundreds of images on a web page is not very feasible. The part of section that the state library can help with on that, and I saw the question earlier, is the platforms. For years now, actually probably closing in on 20 years, we've had Iowa Heritage Digital Collection available to any cultural institution in Iowa, which means every public library can use it. It's a platform that allows you to create, store, and display digital collections, whether they're a single item or thousands of items. And yes, Sam just posted that on there. It's one where the nice thing about it is that it's very intuitive, very easy to use, and also very flexible. It's, the basic thing is you create and name a collection and put some information about it. You create the information for an image, you upload the image, and you deposit it in the collection. So if you're doing, like I said, for instance, football team images, you could have, the My High School football team collection, and then you can just start putting images in it. And it's one where when you put the image in, you accompany it with a little bit of metadata. Metadata is the information that tells about something. Obviously, in libraries, you're familiar with metadata for the fact that a cataloging record is metadata for that book. You do the same thing with the images, and it can be as brief as just 1972 quarterback Joe Smith, but then it's flexible enough that you can put information about that person, dates, keywords, subjects, whatever you want to enhance that image in your collections. The other part is if you use something like IHDC, Iowa Heritage Digital Collection, or another, usually you log in, you have your own workspace. So you can develop a collection until you're ready to put it out there, and then you can put it out there. And link to that from your web page. So you would only have to link to one link on a web page. And the question about using Past Perfect. Yes, that's another platform that you can use like that. I'm not 100% sure on if there's any costs or what the server requirements are on using something like Past Perfect. The infomercial side of things is the fact that Iowa Heritage Digital Collection is free to everybody, it's stable, and all the links are permanent. Even if we've changed servers, which we've done multiple times, the links all stay the same. And when you use that, you can create an account for your institution. So in 20, 30, 50 years, when you retire, then the next person can take over and have the same access. One of the things I've seen libraries do, not just with IHDC, but other collection points, is you make the collection with the idea that, okay, over here, I'm going to list all my collections and you go to any time, but then they bring it forward, make more advertising of it, make more outreach level for specific reasons. If it's a lot of communities have an annual event. I grew up in Nevada, Missouri, which every year in early June has what they call Bushwhacker Days, because way back in the Civil War era, there was a bunch of guys in the area that decided we don't like the Union and would run around and do all sorts of stuff. But that's their annual celebration. And, so you may have a collection of that sort of material that you bring up a month before and say, don't forget, we have all these wonderful things about our old settlers picnic coming up, or whatever would be something that you might want to bring forward and use. Different libraries that have used IHDC have worked it so that they have links to different collections directly. One that has some genealogy stuff will have the Smith family genealogy, and you click on that and it goes right into the collection in the Iowa Heritage Digital Collections. Other ones just have a link to the main search thing for most of their materials, just because the search page gets them there, and they have so much, which is fortunate, that they can't link to everything they want. And that goes across the board, no matter what platform you're on. You can either link directly to items, you can link to collection level, or you can link to just to that service and say, our stuff's in there, search there. That's one, like, you can also highlight when you're doing new materials. You can sit there and say, we've just digitized, and you throw it out there and let them see it. Some of the other things you can do that are sort of low level on promoting them, you can create a catalog record in your catalog that says, Smith family genealogy, and you can put a link in there to that digital collection. And, it would just be that they would be looking in the collection, they would find the name, and then they would go to the material. That's another easy way to digitize it and put it out there so people can find it. You never quite know how people are going to find these things. So you can highlight those that you feel worthy of highlighting, and the rest can just reside somewhere on your web page or in your catalog. The other thing to be aware of on getting everything out there so everybody can see them and find them is that most of the large search engines, and obviously we can say Google, will find these, quote unquote, scrape them and put them out there, and based on whatever their algorithm is. And if somebody's searching for, Tom Kaiser genealogy, and it comes up because it's been scraped, they may find it on there on just a random Google search. The most platforms are meet different standards and different levels of availability for those sort of things. So they make it so that it's easy for things like search engines and other libraries using other softwares to find and get the links to go to those sort of collections.
This is great, Tom. I would just like to put a plug in for Iowa Heritage Digital Collections. It's such a cool resource. The link is there in the chat. It's just iowaheritage.org. If you're watching this on the recording and don't have access to the chat, a quick Google search will also pull it up. But lots of really rich history there in so many different formats. So you have genealogies and photos and newspapers and all of the above. But we are down to our last 4 minutes, and we've talked about the software. We've talked about the what and the why and the how. I'm wondering if there's any other special little thing you want to announce in our last few minutes here.
Yeah, I'll move to the next step of our trying to help you all with all of this. Obviously, Iowa Heritage Digital Collection, a place to put your materials, to present your materials, and to keep them stored. But right before this wonderful pandemic, we got a grant and got some equipment that we're going to be able to make available to public libraries to use in digitization programs. We have 6 sets of large flatbed scanners with laptops, all the requisite hardware and software for you to do a digitization project. And currently, I have 2 out there that are being used sort of as my guinea pigs to find out how long it takes them to get through material, how well everything works. They're 17 by 22 inch flatbed scanners and a laptop with the software on. And we'll be able to loan those out to libraries and accompany them on delivery to give you all of the necessary walkthrough and training. The state library, mostly through me, can also help you do those processes of looking at your collections and evaluating them and selecting materials and anything related to it from A to Z, whether it's helping you with copyright questions, helping you with organization, helping you with making determinations on viability of materials. We can help you all along the process. And now we actually have hardware that we can loan out to you to get it done. And then if you want to go and use the IHDC platform, we've got that available too. So hopefully we have everything in place that we can help you do a digitization project from start to finish.
And if someone does have we've had some questions, and I think you addressed this, but once you have something digitized in IHDC, then you can put that link in your catalog and store it along with your bibliographic record for that collection. That's the word I'm looking for. And we had one person who specifically said, do you have tips on digitizing yearbooks? I'm assuming that that's the kind of thing that you, Tom, would say like, hey, I've got this scanner. It's a good
Yep.
size to handle yearbooks. And how
Yep.
about I come drop it off at your library and walk you through some of that?
Right. That's one option there. Obviously, doing books on flatbeds, you have to be a little bit more physically involved to hold it flat enough to get a good image. One of the side sort of things that we have available to help you is that here at the state library, if you have an oversized item, bound material usually that you need to digitize, we do have an overhead scanner that can handle up to newspaper sized materials. Now, everybody's got staffing issues, so we do require that you actually come down here and do it. We don't have enough folks on hand to be able to digitize everything for everybody else. But say you do have a large book that you want done, or we have helped people do entire yearbook scanning on there. All of that just figures into what you've got to decide time-wise if that works for you all.
We have as well, someone asked about film negatives. That is not part of the 6 that will go out statewide.
No,
but they could come to Des Moines and scan negatives here if they wanted
can. We do have a scanner here that's capable of scanning slides and negatives, everything from the little tiny size of something like an 8mm all the way up to, I think it'll do all the way up to the 10x12 negatives.
Okay.
So, yep, we can help with that here. That's another one. It's just, that's going to be a time requirement. The one part to play into all your planning is also, looking to see what your community would like to help you with. One library out there I know is doing a lot of stuff. They have a very dedicated volunteer that's just a local person that's very big into their genealogy, so he's wanting to help out. The other ones use just staffers. And last but not least, on the come here and get it scanned, we did make it so that our overhead scanner also has a third camera that we can hook up, and it's capable of doing maps and oversized posters, things bigger than newspapers. We developed that just because we have had the occasional panoramic picture. They're common to find in the 30s, 40s, 50s, where they'll take a picture of a group of people on a campus and it's going to be 12 inches high and 3 foot long. So we can help you with all of the odd and difficult scanning if you have the time to come down here.
And your email, Tom, is just tom.kaiser@iowa.gov. Is that right?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. So we have, I think if you have additional questions about specific kinds of formats and that sort of thing, you can definitely reach out to Tom. Now, Tom, we really are over time, but I kind of want to hear in closing from you, just someone who's thinking of jumping in, what is your encouragement to them to get started? Why should they undertake a project like this?
Well, at our base as librarians, our desire is to get the right book to the right person. And of course, that automatically implies a physical limit of one book, one person, one time. If you digitize it, you're essentially putting that in everybody's hands. You're essentially making it so everybody can access that material. And it also comes back on you for if they're like, this was great, what else do you have? It's its own way of multiplying its use. I have never heard of anybody saying, I made a mistake scanning that, nobody uses it. Somebody's always going to be using it. It's going to be found. And if it is something that you've decided to put out that didn't have a draw at the beginning, just give it one of those little pushes. That's going to be something that your community is going to be so enthused to being able to find this material online, especially for the younger generations that they did story time when they were little. They loved the library, but now I can just get it online. And so you want to jump into that stream. You want to be part of that community online, and then the sky's the limit on how you're going to advertise it. I mean, that's the other thing. You can advertise your stuff through all of your social media. You can put it on flyers. You can put it on, however you wish to, get that information out there.
Yeah, I think it's a great community engagement tool, and we're going to hear more about that next week. I did put a link in the chat as well. We will be hearing from four librarians, three librarians. I've lost track.
I believe it's four.
Four folks from around the state who have digitized collections of different sizes and done different things with them as well. So we do have several folks have used the IHDC to put their stuff in, and then we'll be hearing from Chris Brown and Pella Public Library. And Pella actually sort of built their own little website around it. So whether you've got a big or small project, you're sure to learn something from those librarians next week, as well as kind of answering that, how they engage their community with some of these collections, because there's great resources there to go out and get people excited about local history as well. So I want to say a big thank you to Tom. I want to encourage all of you guys to check out the Iowa Heritage Digital Collection. Be thinking about how you can integrate your local history materials in there. Reach out to Tom if you do have questions about getting one of our 6 scanners. There's 1 or 2 already out on the road. Is that right?
2 are out right now.
2 are out. So we've got 4 others we'd love to get in the hands of librarians. As well as, if we have a waiting list, that's awesome, I think. Yep. Is that right, Tom? So
that would be awesome, yes. And that's part of what these guys are doing as guinea pigs for me. How long did it take you to do what volume of material? And each one of them has come back at me and said, well, I did the first one. Can I keep it for a second one? And I'm like, until I have a waiting list, yes.
All right. Yeah, so we're going to hear a lot of interesting things next week from our panelists. I'll put that link in chat one more time. Thank you so much to Tom for joining us today and giving us lots of food for thought on how we can handle these local collections in our libraries. And thanks everyone for coming. Have a great rest of your day.